What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have some big stuff that's going to be happening just in a little while, where we're getting ready for peak hurricane season to really start ramping up. As climatologically speaking, this is around the time where you should be preparing for some big hurricanes to start organizing and developing in the Atlantic Ocean. And we're going to go ahead and start off with showing you some more satellite observations that we are paying attention to. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. We're already starting to see some healthy tropical waves right now in parts of the main development region. We're seeing two back-to-back pretty decent-looking tropical waves in the MDR, one just southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands, and another one about a few hundred miles to the west of that. And overall, they do look pretty healthy at this current point in time. However, they're going to be entering a more unfavorable environment for the time being, which is why I don't fully anticipate development to happen with either of those cells. But there is a couple of tropical waves right after that I am paying attention to, and let's go ahead and start with those right there, as well as take a look at the overall environments that we're paying attention to. So here's the situation. We have another tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa, just south of Mauritania over here, and we have another tropical wave coming right afterward. Both of these don't look as organized as of right now compared to what we're seeing in the ocean, but it's going to take a little bit of time. What we're going to see is we're going to start seeing kind of the convection start to fade off slowly as it moves towards the tropical Atlantic, and then depending on what happens, we could see a situation where where the tropical wave starts to get organized and starts to show signs of kind of some rotation we're taking a look at. The tropical waves that are currently in the Atlantic Ocean at this current point, yeah, both of them are showing showing signs of deep convection, but they're not showing many signs of rotation. There's not a lot of vorticity with both of them, and overall, those look like they're going to be more or less rainmakers. And I don't really expect this to organize much further, because there is a little bit of wind shear that is kind of starting to chip at it a little bit. So overall, the main situation that you need to take away from this is basically these two tropical waves may look impressive on the surface right here, but it's battling some wind shear. It's going to be battling the Sahara dust. It's going to be battling some dry air. Matter of fact, we can go ahead and show you the Sahara dust. The Sahara dust is just to the north of these tropical waves right there. And that's the main reason why I don't expect this to really develop anytime soon at this current point. But what it is doing is something a little more interesting that long-term could end up helping hurricane season start to really ramp up in the next couple of weeks or so. So let's go ahead and show you the water vapor imagery right here. What we're noticing right here is the eastern and now central part of the main development region now have a relatively large, robust area of moist air, and a lot of the dry air has been kind of mixed out thanks to these tropical waves. And what that's doing overall, as well as a more active intertropical convergence zone region, is it's ultimately allowing for these waves to just kind of move into the dry air and allow for it to mix out a lot of that dry air that's dealing with. So that's what we're paying attention to at this current point. There is still quite a bit of Sahara dust, but there's not nearly as much as what we were seeing last year, and not nearly as much as what we were seeing 2 years ago. But the overall pattern of Sahara dust does seem to be on schedule. There's just less of it, which is allowing for this atmosphere to moisten up a lot faster than it did last year. Because ultimately what we saw last year was we saw the insane warm waters. We saw the wind shear collapse in the last week of July, but it was kind of the Sahara dust that lingered until the second week of August. And by the time that whole thing started to dissipate, that's when tropical activity really started to ramp up, and that's when we saw 4 named storms in about 36 hours. That's how much it ramped up, and we're seeing a similar setup that may be happening when the MJO comes into the Atlantic Ocean and allows for tropical development to happen. We've been paying attention to the Climate Prediction Center as well. They unfortunately they apparently have updated it, but the graph is the same at this current point. They have updated their forecast right here. At the same time, though, I'm waiting for that graphic to finally pull up and allow for stuff to really kind of give us a better grasp of what we're looking at least with the map. But they did update their Outlook discussion over here, which we can go ahead and kind of move the screen over to kind of give a general gist of what we're looking at. at this current point of time. So overall, what they're suggesting is an uptick at tropical activity is going to potentially spread into the Atlantic around week 2 or week 3. That's the kind of layman's terms version of it right there. Unfortunately, we don't have the graphic right there to kind of show you how much it is, but hopefully we will get that to you at a later point, and I can show that to you either later in this video or in tomorrow's video. But that's kind of what they're looking at this current point in time. Regardless, one thing I'm paying attention to, and I continue to pay attention to, is the Madden-Julian oscillation at this current point in time. The Madden-Julian oscillation has remained relatively weak for the last little while. It's going to remain relatively weak for the next 10 days or so. It's kind of sitting over the maritime continent or in the western Pacific Ocean, but it is forecasted to move towards the eastern Pacific Ocean early next week, and by late next week, we're forecasting this to be over the Atlantic, at least over the main development region of the Atlantic Ocean over there. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to that, and we can go ahead and show you the forecast for the Madden-Julian oscillation right here. Let's go ahead and move this over just to kind of give you a more optimal viewing point. I apologize for not doing that earlier when it came to moving showing you the Madden-Julian oscillation there, but this is kind of it there now, so now you see it. But here's what we're looking at with the forecast. In terms of the forecast, around day 5, it's fully expected to remain relatively weak, or in parts of the western Pacific or maritime continent regions over here, which is regions 5 or 6. But then between 5 and 10 days, you see a pretty dramatic shift away from this area all the way towards the western hemisphere, which is kind of encompassing the eastern Pacific and Atlantic Ocean right there. And varying forecast, I'd say about 80% of the forecasts are calling for around a moderate Madden-Julian oscillation to really ramp up. It's going to be outside of this circle right here, which is indicative of a relatively weak, or in some cases non-existent, Madden-Julian oscillation. But these forecasts, at least with the ensembles that they are showing, is forecasting for around a moderate MJO to move through the eastern Pacific and Atlantic Ocean as we get into the last week of July, the last couple of days of July, and as we get into the first few days of August right there. So that's definitely something you're going to want to pay attention to, because one thing I've been telling you guys is the MJO really likes to enhance your convection, and the MJO really likes to do a lot more things than that make it everything unexpected. So overall, that's something we need to pay attention to, and it is expected to be there in the next 10 days or so, and I fully expect tropical waves to have a much better chance of organization and development in that current time period. This Climate Prediction Center agrees with that to some extent. Their previous chart had something happening near the Lesser and Greater Antilles right there. So overall stuff that we're going to have to continue to keep an eye on, overall stuff we're going to have to pay attention to at this current point in time. So that's just kind of your new updates that we have when it comes to the MJO forecast. We finally have that for you. We are finally starting to see some more signs from the Climate Prediction Center that the Atlantic is about to wake up, and we're finally seeing some more signs, at least from what we're seeing with the observations, that the Atlantic is about to wake up. Keep in mind, it's most likely not going to start ramping up. We're not going to see probably an area of interest tagged until probably the last couple of days of July or the first few days of August, because there's still too much Sahara dust in the Atlantic to kind of allow for tropical development. But that Sahara dust is trending down, 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 and as you'll see in the forecasts, the Sahara dust is going to see another pattern shift, which is in combination with the surge, which I find is pretty interesting, because yes, there is expected to be another surge around July 30th and 31st of Sahara dust in the tropical Atlantic. However, one thing I'm noticing now is a lot of that surge is now starting to get redirected towards Europe, and I'll show you the forecast in just a second, but I want to go over a few other things that we need to pay attention to as well. Well, we're noticing in the ENSO region, regions 1 and 2, we're starting to see, at least what we've noticed over the last day or so, is we've noticed that the temperatures off the coast of South America have plummeted and allowed regions 1 and 2 to get down to about minus 0.68 degrees, which is firmly comfortable in the La Nina region right there. Now, keep in mind, this is happening happen for about 1 day, and typically you're going to need at least 30 days of these kinds of conditions in regions 1 and 2, as well as regions 3 and 4, to confidently declare a La Nina right there. So that's ultimately what I'm looking at. I zoomed in for you guys just to give you a better viewing point with this, but that's what we're taking a look at. Let's go ahead and show you regions 3 and 4. Zoom in on this. You are seeing a bit of a leveling off in regions 3 and 4. You're starting to see a bit of a stabilizing factor in association. We're about minus 0.23 degrees below average at this current point, which is comfortably in the negative neutral phase. Region 3 and Region 4 are kind of in tandem right there. Region 4 is kind of stabilized, and it's not going up anymore. It's kind of leveled off around positive 0.24 degrees above average. So you're probably asking me right now, you're saying all these things right there. You're talking about above average, below average. What does that mean for hurricane season? What this means for hurricane season is we're kind of looking at a scenario where we're not going to have a relatively strong La Nina like a lot of forecasts were predicting down the like in what we were seeing like 3 months ago. We're not seeing that anymore. Instead, what we're seeing is a negative neutral or weak La Nina forecast. And ultimately, what that, in my opinion, will do is it's going to make things even worse for much of the hurricane season, because what that does is it allows for the steering currents to be pretty much the perfect strength to push tropical cyclones and hurricanes towards towards land, especially towards Mexico, the continental United States, the Caribbean, Central America, those kinds of things right there. So that's what we're paying attention to when it comes to that, and that's why I'm updating with you on these regions right there, because the main thing we're looking at now, because at this point the La Nina and the weakening of the El Nino already did its job, and the wind shear is starting to trend down thanks to that. But what we're paying attention to now is the other factor we're paying attention to, which is steering currents. The reason we didn't really have very many systems make landfall, even though they formed in the Atlantic last year, is because it was an El Nino, and the Bermuda High was weak enough to allow systems to stay out to sea. That's what we are paying attention to. This case does not look like that's going to happen, and it looks like it's going to be a higher likely it's going to be a greater likely. It's going to be more likely. Excuse me. Sorry for stuttering right there. It's going to be more likely for systems to potentially impact land now. So that's definitely something you need to keep an eye on in regards to what we're looking at right here. Let's go ahead and show you the global sea surface temperatures right there. Sea surface temperatures are absolutely off the charts. They are really starting to warm up in the eastern Caribbean Sea now, and they're starting to warm up now in parts of the Atlantic Basin once again. And we're seeing 26 plus degrees Celsius waters as far north as 40 degrees north, which in layman's terms, if you took a measuring stick right there and kind of move that to the west, that's pretty much on the same trajectory. It's pretty much as far north as New York City right there. So that's what I'm concerned about right here. The fact that we're not just seeing warm waters in the tropics, but we're still seeing these warm waters in the subtropical Atlantic is scary, especially considering the fact that what we're going to potentially be looking at is if a hurricane does stay out to sea, well, now it's going to have a longer time to maintain its intensity. It'll cool down the waters, which will hopefully be good news. But that also puts New England and New York City and the mid-Atlantic at more risk because of these water temperatures if the steering currents kick in and allow for the system to push that far to the west. It's not impossible. Remember, we saw this with Hurricane Lee. It moved in towards Nova Scotia. It brought a lot of impacts to Maine. It caused a lot of power outages. It caused a lot of trees to go down in that state. So that's a kind of situation that we're paying attention to when it comes to at least that area right there. But in the tropical Atlantic, where it's 30 degrees north towards the equator, in that region right there, we're already looking at water temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius in about 70% of the Gulf of Mexico and a large chunk of the Caribbean Sea over there. It is a bit more isolated across a lot of these regions right there, but we'll have to pay attention to that. But regardless of that, we're seeing another surge of water temperatures in the main development region. 27 plus degrees Celsius or 79 plus degree. No, that's not 79. That's 81 plus degree Fahrenheit waters extend throughout the entire main development region, and that's more than enough water to cause hurricane development, even as far east as the Cabo Verde Islands if things start to ramp up from there. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's something we're going to have to pay attention to. I want to go ahead and show you the climate reanalyzer. I want to see what the anomalies are looking like as well, just to kind of see what's potentially looking at. Yeah, the anomalies are absolutely incredible. And it's in that 40-degree range that I was referring to you guys, where there's 26 degrees Celsius waters that far to the north. These anomalies, the water is so warm up here, that is the reason the El Nino did nothing to the tropical activity. That's the reason. Like, these waters crushed the El Nino, and that was a pretty strong El Nino from last year, if we remember that. It got up to about 2 degrees above average in the Enso region. That's a very strong El Nino right there, ladies and gentlemen, but it did nothing to the hurricane activity because of this right here. And I already explained it, so I don't need to explain it again. But another thing that I'm paying attention to, too, is these anomalies, these cooler than average, slightly cooler than average anomalies, around 30 degrees north or so, just around in the area between the tropical and subtropical Atlantic right there, where I have been scrolling my cursor around. A lot of people are probably going to look at that and say, oh, that might be some good news. That might be some good news because hurricane season will kind of die down. Not exactly, and I've said this before. And this pattern right there is kind of what happened in 2017, where you had cooler anomalies over here, which ended up concentrating all the hurricane activity and all the warm waters at least in the tropics in the tropical region. And what did you see? That year we had 10 consecutive hurricanes right there. And matter of fact, if I can pull that up for you very quickly while I'm talking to you, we can show you the 2017 sea surface temperatures, at least across the Atlantic, to show you what we are talking about at this current point. But in the meantime, while I'm doing that whole cool anomaly area is a little concerning to take a look at least with the context we now have right there. But in the meantime, as we continue to kind of get rid of these years right there and kind of isolate the 2017 values right there to just to emphasize this. All right, here's what we have right here. This was what we had in 2017. The water temperatures in 2017 we're already at the point in 2024 where the waters have almost in 2017, the waters peaked at 24.6 degrees Celsius in the Atlantic. That's about 76 degrees Fahrenheit. We're at 24.5 and expected to continue that increase, so we're already expected to have warmer waters than 2017. And considering the fact that we're seeing a pattern similar to that, that is concerning for me, and that should concern a lot of people in the Atlantic Ocean basin that are potentially going to get impacted by hurricanes. I know a lot of people in my comment section are going, oh, the hurricane season is dead. There's not much going on in July. That's because the conditions aren't favorable for that right now, and they're getting primed for what's going to happen in August, September, and October. And just an example of that, wind shear, yeah, there's some areas of wind shear it is going to inhibit some development, also in the eastern Atlantic Ocean as well, but that's expected to oscillate and that's expected to go on a downward course right there. So ultimately, that's what we're paying attention to. One last thing I want to go ahead and show you is the dry air, since I was kind of referring to that earlier. Let's go ahead and show you the dry air forecast right here. The dry air that's going to be moving through. The main thing I want to take a look at is that surge of Sahara dust that we're going to be expecting in the next few days or so, around the last couple of days of July. Because what we're noticing here is we're noticing a bit of a breakdown of the Sahara dust, and we're noticing a bit more of a surge of moisture in the main development region and intertropical convergence zone. Dry air is still going to be a potential thing right there, but overall what we're potentially going to be looking at is, once again, we're going to be seeing a surge of dry air and Sahara dust in the last couple of days of July. But notice that about, I'd say, 50% of that surge does not make it further west than about 30 degrees west into the Atlantic Ocean, because a lot of it gets pushed up to Europe, and it kind of mitigates the whole thing, and it mitigates a lot of the Sahara dust. And you're also noticing a lot more of a robust a main development region, at least in terms of moisture right there. And that's something you need to pay attention to, because a tropical wave could always absolutely take full advantage of that huge moisture pocket, coupled with lower wind shear values right there in that similar region, and it could end up blowing up into a big tropical cyclone down the road that could potentially, with the Bermuda high strength, as strong as it is expected to be, push it towards the Caribbean Sea at the very least. So ultimately, this is all stuff we're going to have to continue to monitor, and this is ultimately stuff we're going to have to pay attention to, especially with the MJO and especially with the Climate Prediction Center stuff. We'll get the graphic for you tomorrow. I wish I could get the pull up the graphic for you today. Unfortunately, it has not updated yet. I really wish they would get on that and fully update that for you guys so I can go ahead and analyze that. But in the meantime, we're going to close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us make more videos like these. The goal of this channel, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. And if you want to come hang out with us at Storms United, be sure to join our Discord server. We're talking tropics in there all the time. Link to that is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.